Idaho Prenatal Protection Act. I'm Senator Brandon Shippy from District 9. Before you is RS 31837. So I want to preface by saying that today we know for a fact that our worth and right to life as human beings is not derived from external circumstances or opinions, but from the Imago Dei. It's written in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Committee, the intent of this legislation is simple: to uphold the equal protection principle found in our U.S. Constitution and Article 1, Section 2 of the Idaho Constitution, to protect the lives of preborn children equally under Idaho's criminal and civil laws, just as we protect the lives of born individuals, to eliminate provisions in Idaho law to allow for intentional killing of preborn life or permit coercion against pregnant mothers. This legislation recognizes that life begins at fertilization and seeks to ensure both justice for preborn children and protection for mothers. This legislation amends Idaho Code to explicitly include preborn children in the definitions of person beginning at fertilization. This reflects the scientific, biological, and moral reality. If a baby in the womb, created in the image of God, is equally human as we are, and it is, then the intentional killing of a preborn child should be recognized and treated under homicide laws just as with any other human being. Homicide laws should apply equally to the preborn and ensure that cases involving their deaths are subject to the same presumptions, defenses, justifications, immunities, and clemencies that apply to a homicide of a person who has been born alive. If we truly believe in the equal humanity of the preborn, then our laws must uphold that truth in practice. This legislation, if passed, would not apply retroactively. It focuses only on future conduct and ensures fairness in its implementation. Laws prohibiting the killing of preborn children address intentional actions and not identity, just as laws against theft or domestic violence focus on conduct rather than criminalizing certain groups. This bill addresses the act of taking a human life and not mothers or doctors or any other persons as a category. Justice requires accountability for intentional actions. To exempt any group from accountability actually undermines the law's integrity and diminishes the value of the life being protected. Furthermore, this legislation establishes the dignity and equality of women in the law by allowing her full participation and equitable treatment in the moral and legal order. Because our laws do not treat self-managed abortions as homicide, pimps and traffickers thrive under such conditions. This legislation would protect vulnerable women from exploitation and ensure justice for their children. This legislation does not mandate the harshest penalties. Just as in other homicide cases, courts will consider circumstances such as coercion or ignorance, ensuring that justice remains proportional and merciful. We also recognize that other parties, such as coercive partners or abortion providers, may bear the greatest culpability. Doctors performing life-affirming procedures to save a mother's life are not considered to be committing homicide, even if those procedures unintentionally result in the death of the preborn child. This legislation recognizes that the primary goal in these situations is to save lives, and that doctors are protected when acting in good faith to save both the mother and the child whenever possible. This legislation does not address any medical procedure directly, but rather just the intentional killing of preborn children. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this legislation is about protecting the lives of all innocent human beings, being a voice for the voiceless, and ensuring that justice is administered equitably. This legislation is about ending our past superstitions and discrimination towards our preborn neighbors. The only constitutional authority that this legislature has to involve itself in a woman's pregnancy is its authority to protect all life equally under the law without partiality or discrimination, to do justice and only justice. This legislation affirms the sanctity of life, upholds the dignity of women, and fulfills our constitutional mandate to provide equal protection for all God's children under the law. I understand that this legislation may not receive a full hearing, but I respectfully ask for your support in printing this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Are there questions? Senator Ruckte?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Shippy, if a woman is pregnant and claims she's had a miscarriage, how does the government determine whether it truly was a miscarriage or an abortion?
Senator Shippy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Rudke, the scope and purpose of this legislation is to simply treat the preborn child equally to any other human being. It doesn't address how a doctor would go about determining whether or not a child is alive or whether it has been deceased already.
Mr. Chairman, a follow-up question. Mr. Chairman, Senator Shippy, then by that reasoning, if we're going to treat this preborn child, as you refer to it, as any other citizen, if there was a question as to whether a death was accidental or of natural causes or caused by somebody's act, the government, through the police force, would do an investigation, correct?
Senator Shippy?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rudke, presumably that would be the process.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ruckte?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Shippy. So this bill would authorize the government, through its police investigatory powers, to investigate whether a woman's alleged miscarriage was actually an abortion.
Senator Shippy?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rudke, I suppose that is possible.
Just one final question.
Senator Ruckte?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Shippy, is it your intention to require victims of rape and incest, even children as young as 12, to carry a pregnancy to term under this legislation?
Senator Shippy?
Mr. Chairman, and Senator Rudke, excuse me. The intent or goal of this legislation is to simply recognize and codify in law that the baby in the womb is equally human as you and I are, and deserves to have the same protections under the law that any born individual has. Does that answer your question?
That tells me that the intent of this legislation is to have even a 12-year-old girl who has been raped or is a victim of incest to carry that child to term.
Senator Shippy?
Thank you.
Welcome to comment.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That isn't the intent of the legislation directly. It's simply to recognize the equal humanity. I recognize that in this fallen, broken world, the horrific natures of such things as rape happen. A baby conceived in rape is still a human being equal to you and me. And if the standard by which we judge these things is by whether or not that baby deserves to live or deserves to die, is our equal humanity and our right to life, that would be, in my opinion, that has to be the simple answer, that baby deserves equal protection and life as any other human being. Otherwise, we have no leg to stand on in any other cases.
Senator Taves?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a comment and a motion. I just want to point out that I believe that Senator Shippy's position is philosophically and morally sound, and I applaud him for having the courage to bring this forward. I move that we send RS 31837 to print.
Motion by Senator Taves. Senator, could you hold on a second? Motion by Senator Taves, second by Senator Adams, that RS 31837 be sent to print. Discussion on the motion, and within that discussion, because the motion is in order any time, but I actually had a couple of comments that I'd like to offer, and then you feel free to, kind of reflect where you concur or where you don't. The pro-life argument debate is, it ranges across the spectrum, and people can say they're pro-life and they fit somewhere on the spectrum. It's not everybody's hardwired at the same place, and there's iterations to that. At least that's my opinion. There's also, from what I'm hearing, the Attorney General has suggested that abortion legislation be kind of put on hold for the time being until court cases are adjudicated that are working their way up through the court, as well as has the gentleman on the second floor indicated something similar. I'll just offer them as context to this debate that we have, and certainly there's interest in the recognition of moving the needle to where it further protects the doctors, the moms, and the victims. And I just kind of want to express this because this isn't a black and white, clear-cut issue for some. I agree it may be for you, Senator, and for others, but for some, it's within some kind of a range on the spectrum. But I just want you to maybe think about that and comment in the areas where you concur or maybe where you don't.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Don't have to comment.
I'm trying to think of how to respond to that. I think I pretty well covered it in my presentation that I believe the only business that the legislature has in, we could use the word controlling or intervening or inserting itself into a woman's pregnancy, is the one principle of that human being in her womb, it does have a right to life because it's human being. If it doesn't have a right to life, then the state has no business in involving itself at all. That's where I would say if it doesn't have a right to life, the state has no business in intervening or inserting itself into a woman's pregnancy. That should be her privacy and her decision. If it does have a right to life, who decides where that life came from? How do we define that? Does the legislature has the authority to define whether this one has a right to life or whether that one has a right to life? So I guess I come at it from a very principled perspective that unless the baby doesn't have a right to life, or if the baby has the right to life, that the legislature has one interest in protecting that life. If it doesn't have the right to life, the legislature should stay out of this completely. That's my position on this.
Are you aware of the comments I reflected on the Attorney General and the Governor or the gentleman on the second floor?
Mr. Chairman, yes. I've had conversations with the Attorney General, with his Chief of Staff, and with his Solicitor General at length about this. They have expressed their potential concerns that it may add a few areas of complication to ongoing litigation. It doesn't ultimately change a ton. It just may create some further arguments being added into the current litigations, is my understanding.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Anthony, I don't know if you have a question or discussion on the motion.
Discussion on the motion.
Thank you, Senator. You're welcome to join us back up. Senator Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the discussion on the motion. I'm going to support the motion to print. And I'm going to do that because of kind of a philosophical way I approach these motions to print. First, with regard to the legislation. As the pro tem, and I've served in leadership in the Republican Party in the state Senate for now. I think this is my 8th year. You have to have a pretty good sense of the Republican Party in the Idaho State Senate to do that. And one of the things I do know very, very clearly about the majority party in the Idaho State Senate is that it is pro-life. And I can say that as a universal truth. Everyone in the Idaho State Senate Republican Party is pro-life. And as the good chairman just described, that's hard always to say in black and white terms what that means, because it is a spectrum. There are different beliefs on what legislative approach that should take. And so I would probably be fairly easily able to represent that the majority caucus would not share the belief that the legislation before us is the proper approach. And I think Senator Shippy understands that. But that having been said, that does not mean that we should exclude the opportunity for Senator Shippy to present and to get this legislation out there and to discuss this legislation. And that it should not be a time that we should explore this kind of legislation. And Senator Shippy knows all of this. I've spent a lot of time visiting with him about this. And he understands that this is a topic that all of us have to address in our minds and in our hearts. And one thing I want to say about the sponsor of this legislation is that he is sincere, he is devout, and he knows that his task before him is to persuade people's minds and their hearts. And so this print hearing is about him having that forum. And for that reason, I will support the motion to print, because I think that the theme that the senators in the majority party always have me talk, and they always hear me preach, is that reasonable minds can disagree. And that we believe in providing the forum for that discussion and for that disagreement. And as we continue to discuss these very important issues, we come to truth. And so I will support that continual dialogue, that as we continue to have very important discussions and we hear very devout people talking about these very important issues, we will come to truth. I have faith in that. And so I'm going to support the motion to print. I'm going to support the idea that we all have respect for one another on these important issues, that we listen to one another, and that we have a dialogue. And so for that reason, I'm going to support this, understanding that the majority of my peers do not agree with this piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ruckey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope I don't sound like a broken record as we move forward in this session, but as a general rule, I vote to print any senator's bills. There will be a small category of bills. I'm still trying to figure out what the parameters of those are right now. They're just ones that I just kind of recognize. I just can't vote to even print that. This is going to be one, so I'm going to vote no. People who watch this know that my questions of Senator Shippy were direct. Those should not be interpreted as any disrespect to Senator Shippy. I think he's sincere. He's a kind person. I've enjoyed working with him, getting to know him. But in a democracy, when we bring controversial ideas and we put them in the marketplace, those ideas are subject to testing and heated discussions even. And that's the way this process works. And it's designed to test the outer edges of what legislation is intending to do, or perhaps not intending to do, but still does. And so those were the purposes of the questions. And I appreciate his answers, and I'll be voting no on the print.
Senator Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to offer up some comments. And Senator Shippy, thank you for your thoughtful presentation as well. You and I have discussed this in the past at length, and so my remarks will be no surprise. I agree with the good pro tem. I do believe that discussion is important. I do believe that supporting our majority caucus. I do appreciate the comments from our chairman as well. But I also personally believe that this bill just goes too far. And I will support the motion to print, but I do have grave concerns regarding this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Senator. Just a couple of comments. When we talk about these tough issues, and I mentioned earlier that I believe that there are on a continuum. They're on some kind of spectrum, and we're not all at the very same place, even though we may have the same foundational beliefs in pro-life or whatever. So I think the idea here was that Senator Shippy, I agree with the comments that have been offered. He's very sincere. He's very genuine in his motives. He's a kind person. He's willing to visit and talk about things, but he's very firm in his beliefs. And this is an opportunity for him to express those and get that out there for purpose of discussion. But I just want to be clear, and I think I would be disingenuous if I didn't clearly communicate to those that are here today and have spent your morning, and appreciate it very much. The bill will not get a hearing, and I've talked to Senator Shippy about that. But I think that the fact that it is put out before the crowd today and will be on the website, that it does get a point of discussion started as far as where his opinion's at, and maybe it helps the further discussion to get to a point of solution as this thing unwinds itself, and has been doing so for decades. So I just want to be honest and clear with those in attendance, and I've certainly communicated that to the good senator. Seeing no other discussion on the motion, those in favor of sending RS 31837 to print indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Senator Ruckty will be recorded as voting no. That motion carries.